Yes, Anas, would you like to switch on your video and talk? In the meantime, we can share some notes, share some concerns, share some thoughts. Huh.
Good afternoon, ma.
Anas, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma. Ma, yesterday I
Good
wrote an
afternoon.
email
Can
and
you?
sent it to the
Uh,
email address that you sent to me, but up to now there is no reply.
okay, doesn't matter. We will wait for their reply. There must be a procedure which they may be following. So we will wait.
Okay, okay, no problem.
Okay, but what I'm trying to say since yesterday that when we have downloaded this module, everyone is not downloaded, then I have to go through this module with you again. Because if we are not reading what I'm discussing, then we can't expect authorities only to be responsible and we are not responsible. That we are not okay with, na? We should take responsibility for ourselves or not, I'm asking. Anas. So, if we are classmates, are we in touch with each other? Is that a responsibility? Are we
Come
responsible to
again.
each other? I'm asking everyone, not only Annas. Only Annas switched on his video, so Annas is replying. Huh. Tell me.
What do you say, ma?
I am saying, are we responsible for ourselves and for each other? Is my first question.
Yes, yes, ma.
How? I'm asking everyone one by one. How are we responsible for ourselves and how are we responsible for each other in this program? This is just 5 days, fifth day. You are going on till 10th October. Am I right? Till 10th October, you have
Yes.
class. All of you. So, how do we take responsibility for ourselves and how do we take responsibility for each other? They are a class. Mean and what are we going to do about it? Is my question. Yes, Chakana. Anas. Michael Simba. Then one by one you should tell me. Francis. We need more students to join, then we can begin because I still have 2 days, today and tomorrow, to complete the course. So I want to see that all are joining so that I can begin.
Hello, ma.
Yes, tell me. Hello.
Due to responsibility, we are responsible for ourselves in order to attend each and every class that
Huh.
was attended by
Right.
the lectures.
Huh.
Secondly, we are the ones responsible for downloading our modules from the LMS portal in terms
Huh.
of lecturing, so that we will
Hmm.
not be asking somebody to help us and send us what has been sent to the has been uploaded in the LMS portal.
Hmm.
And on responsible for others,
Hmm.
we used to share experience with each other of us, each one other
Hmm.
of us, and we advise each other in order to participate in all the activities that have been made in the platform. That's what we are doing in ourselves. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So now, who are your friends in this classroom online? Who are your friends here?
My friends are like Ahmad Buba, there is Amina Nasib,
Huh?
there is Shuaibu Ali, I think it's Shuaibu Ali,
Huh?
and most of them are my friends because we used to interact in social media, in WhatsApp, because we have a group in WhatsApp. We used to interact. Even
Where are they?
Ahmad Muhammad,
Mahmoud.
I have talked to Ahmad Buba. He will be online
Uh-huh.
because yesterday is online, but his network did not allow him to participate very well. And
Right.
I sent a message to Amina Nasib.
Hmm. Hmm. Then
And the rest are online.
okay.
And
Now,
that's what I'm trying to
Chakana and Francis, can you switch on your video before I continue? the block 3 basics of psychology for social workers. Can you switch on your video and share your responsibility? What you learned from yesterday's class? Do you remember anything? Did you attend? Because I covered these concepts which I am showing you now: attitudes and values, perception, learning, memory, and we came to defense mechanisms, and we were supposed to read about defense mechanisms. So, did anybody try and read anything about defense mechanisms yesterday evening? Today, we are still waiting for others to join. Sunny, can you switch on your video? Okay, Chakana is tied up. What about the others? Chaima, Pandiro, Francis. We had discussed defense mechanisms yesterday, and you were all very excited at that time, giving your own explanations and your own understanding about what defense mechanisms we were discussing. And if you remember, we had been through some defense mechanisms, their description and their discussion, beginning with denial, refusing to accept reality situations, thus blocking external events from our awareness. Moving on to repression, which is an unconscious defense mechanism which is employed by the ego to keep our disturbing and threatening thoughts from becoming conscious. Then we moved on to projection, which is another psychological defense mechanism in which an individual attributes unwanted thoughts, unwanted feelings, unwanted motives onto another person. Then, fourthly, we went to discuss displacement, which is the redirection of an impulse, usually an aggressive impulse, onto a powerful substitute target. So, we have using the example that suppose in a job situation, in an employment situation, an employee is feeling frustrated with his boss or his employer. He cannot retaliate, he cannot retort, he cannot refuse to do the work which is assigned to him. He cannot project his anger. He cannot communicate to the employer that he's frustrated. He might take out his frustration by coming home and banging the door or kicking his poor pet dog or getting angry on his spouse or getting angry with the children for no fault of theirs. All this becomes an explanation for what is displacement. After displacement, we went on to discuss the next defense mechanism called regression. Regression means retreating back, regressing back, enabling a person to psychologically go back in time, to psychologically go back in the past, where there's a safety element. Go back to that time when he or she felt safe. So the trouble, the fear, the anxiety which the person may be facing in the present context is forgotten for the time being by becoming more childish or primitive. So, thumb sucking, wetting the bed, all these are examples of regression. If we are confronted by such situations in the cases which we deal with, we need to understand these defense mechanisms in the context that we may be dealing with situations where we may not be able to know that there are psychological reasons for what is happening, that it is not just a physiological reason that bedwetting has happened, or someone has become a chain smoker, or someone has got addicted to something and is unable to leave it. There could be psychological reasons which include defense mechanisms which we employ for us to understand and do the analysis of the case study which we may be having to deal with in our work life or in our field work program. So the next a defense mechanism which we are now coming to is sublimation. Sublimation is similar to displacement, but it takes place when we manage to displace our unacceptable emotions into behaviors which are constructive and socially acceptable. So, because we want to be accepted by society, because we want to be accepted by our peers, because we need to be accepted by our family, we may use sublimation as a defense mechanism. So, what is an unacceptable emotion or a behavior? That needs to be understood. As you were saying when we were talking of the process of growing up, and some of you were mentioning that an adolescent's behavior is projected in adulthood. Adults who should take responsibility for their actions may be behaving like adolescents and may not take responsibility for family life. In such situations, they may be using sublimation as a defense mechanism. This slide also tells us that many great artists and musicians who might have had some unhappiness in their lives, may not be content in their personal lives, may not be at peace in their personal lives, use the medium of art or music or design or theater to express themselves. Thus, sports also sometimes is used as a defense mechanism because they may not be able to express themselves in other ways and do not want it to be known that they are using sublimation as a form of defense mechanism. So it's important for us to understand that these defense mechanisms, what they are, how they can project themselves, how we need to be able to identify them if we are confronted by a situation. More than one defense mechanism could be used by one individual at a time. All these are our reality situations. So I did a little bit of recap for you because none of you are speaking up today and less people have joined. And now I will proceed to the next defense mechanism which I have presented to you, called rationalization. So rationalization is a defense mechanism which involves that in the mind, in the thinking level, there is a distortion of facts to make an event or impulse look less threatening. So some student who has been given a task to be the compare on stage, to conduct a program on stage, may not be well prepared, may not be having confronted his anxiety or his fear, and he or she may use rationalization as a defense mechanism by saying that I'm not feeling well, so I'll not be able to be compared. I have to give it to someone else. So they are afraid that their ego will be hurt, that they have been unable to perform the role which they had been asked to perform. So these are situations which we need to understand, that how do we rationalize our fears? How do we rationalize our insecurities? How do we rationalize our inadequacies in meeting up to a situation, that we are unable to come at par with what is required for us in a given situation? The next defense mechanism, as projected, is reaction formation. Reaction formation, also called believing the opposite. So, believing the opposite of what is reality is called reaction formation. Reaction formation is a psychological defense mechanism in which a person goes beyond denial. You remember we talked of denial as one of the first simple forms of defense mechanisms. But in reaction formation, the person goes beyond denial and behaves in the opposite way to which he or she thinks or feels. So, conscious behavior is adopted to overcompensate for the anxiety a person feels regarding their socially unacceptable, unconscious thoughts or behaviors. So, some behaviors, thoughts, and emotions which are not accepted in society, In order to cover up for that, we use reaction formation. Reaction formation is generally marked by exaggerated behavior, overcompensation, showing off, compulsiveness. By using reaction formation, the id is satisfied while keeping the ego in ignorance of the true motive. So the ego believes what the id is saying, and reaction formation is used as a defense mechanism to save the ego from being hurt. So, therapists, social workers, counselors often observe reaction formation in patients who claim to strongly believe in something and become angry at everyone who disagrees. So, some patients, some clients, they may say that this is my point of view, this is my thought process, this is what I believe in strongly. And if my peers or my therapist or my counselor or my parent or my spouse disagrees with me, I get angry at everyone who disagrees with me. This is one very strong form of reaction formation in a person, which requires that the therapist or the counselor address it after understanding it. The next defense mechanism is introjection, which is sometimes called identification. Involves taking into your own personality characteristics of someone else. So there are personality characteristics of someone else, but you are taking it on as if they are your own personality characteristics. So this is important to understand because it solves some emotional difficulty which you are grappling with. You may be unable to come to terms with your own emotions. So you superimpose someone else's personality characteristics on yourself. Introjection is very important to the theory propagated by Freud. Remember, we spoke of Sigmund Freud yesterday and day before. So, introjection is very important to the theory proposed by Freud as a defense mechanism by which we develop our superegos. What is an example now of introjection? A child who is left alone frequently. You know that there are some children, because parents are working, they may be left alone to fend for themselves when their parents are at work, and there may not be a caretaker in the house, or the parents may not have returned from work, but the child may have returned from his or her school. So sometimes children are left alone in the house. So a child who may be left alone in the house frequently may in some ways try to become mama, mom, in order to lessen his or her fears. So they start doing a role play as if they are the mother, not the child. Sometimes they make their dolls or their animals, they look after them, they create a situation in the house like a play area and try to pacify their dolls, put them to sleep, tell them not to worry. We can find sometimes older children or teenagers also imitating their favorite rock star, favorite musician, favorite sports hero in order to establish an identity that they no longer behave like a child, but they superimpose the personality of the musician or the sports star or the rock star onto themselves or the mother onto themselves as a defense mechanism to hide behind the fears of being left alone. So I want to take a pause here before I continue. That have you any time encountered any such situation in which any of these defense mechanisms which we have been discussing since yesterday, you have come face to face with? Like yesterday, Mahmood gave an example. I don't know if any other example is coming to your mind. Simba, Anas, Chaima, any example you are remembering after yesterday's class and after revision now of some more things that I have told you, or should I proceed? Have any of us by any chance in our childhood, if we recall now, have had to use any defense mechanism? That is also important to discuss. Yes, Chakana and Simba, who would like to go first? Chakana's hand is raised, I think, since half an hour, so maybe it's by mistake. Simba, you need to switch on your video and share your thoughts.
Hello, ma'am.
Hmm. Hello, please go ahead. Very
Yeah,
good.
yeah, on defense mechanism, which I've been talking about yesterday,
Hmm.
I did go through it through the module.
Very good.
I did have get a lot of experiences,
Hmm.
but especially I was based on the sublimation defense mechanism,
Hmm.
of which most of the times that I live as somebody who have a family,
Hmm.
children, and a wife.
Hmm.
I've been meeting a lot of obstacles and hindrances
Hmm.
on the way of operating within my family. Some
Hmm.
other situation comes to me that it's a bit difficult for myself to control or
Hmm.
even to solve, uh, such as financial problems, maybe
Right.
family problems, and a lot of more things. So on sublimation, I've been trying myself or existing myself or left home, going somewhere to get relief on myself, even to play football, sometimes soccer and table tennis and whatsoever, in order
Right.
just to release the situation which is heavy upon me, that
Hmm.
I should be um, denied or somehow be left from me by the substitute of the sports that I've been indulged in. So
Right.
on sublimation, I've been doing this, and I know but most of the times that I feel angry, or sometimes that I'm angry,
Hmm.
I just depart from home, going somewhere, doing some other pieces of activities and sports that can comfort me somewhere. Thank you, ma'am.
Hmm. Very good. I'm very glad that you people are having courage to share your own experiences, because if we are not coming to terms with our own selves, that we as normal human beings also use defense mechanisms, how will we able to identify them in our clients, accept that they exist, and then enable the clients to solve their problems? Because enabling the client to understand that just using a defense mechanism is not going to help him, we have to work around it, and that becomes part of counseling and therapy. Rashidat, I think I didn't see you yesterday, I didn't hear you yesterday. Would you like to switch on your video and then they to let me know that are you understanding what I'm saying? Do you have any opinion on what has been discussed? Do you have any thought? Do you have any questions as we are finishing day 5 today? Tomorrow is the last day of class, so we will not be able to have more time. We should address our questions as we are discussing the topics. Have you been able to download the module, Rashida? Are you there? Dente, no response. So then I should continue. If there's anything you wish to say, like Michael Simba, I will be very happy to hear your thoughts, because it is a participative kind of process. We have completed introjection as a
Thank you,
defense
ma'am.
mechanism. Yeah, I am hoping that others will also take cue from Simba. Mahmoud is not here today. Some more students who joined yesterday are also absent today. We were hoping that the strength will increase, but it is unfortunate. Now we are moving to the next defense mechanism, which is called emotional insulation. It is a protective layer between the self and the world. We insulate our emotions between ourself and the world so that others don't come to know. Yes, so Dente, I want to see your video. After downloading the module, did you read it? That is why I'm asking individually, because it is a small group. So it is easy to ask these questions. Somebody has just joined, I have to ask her also. We need to know what you are understanding, because this is a course has been designed with a lot of difficulty by IGNU. They have made a lot of efforts, but if the participation is poor, then it is very unfortunate. So coming back to this defense mechanism of emotional insulation, it is the protective layer between the self and the world. It enables us as human beings to go through the ups and downs of our interactions with a positive sense of ourselves. It is like an emotional skin, so that others don't come to know what we think and feel. Our emotions, feelings, thoughts, fears, anxieties are unknown to anybody else except us. We insulate ourselves from others by using this defense mechanism. The next defense mechanism, I think it is the last, is intellectualization, which is a defense mechanism in which people reason out a problem to avoid uncomfortable or distressing emotions. So we intellectualize it, we leave it in our head like a cognition, like a thought, like an academic jargon we may use. We may give some theory, but we may not deal with it. So if a woman's roommate announced, for example, that she's moving out, the woman might conduct a detailed financial analysis of a new budget rather than confront the fact that if I'm left alone in my flat, if I have to stay alone in my flat, then I will be have to confront with emotions of sadness, loneliness, anger. I will have to handle my own housework. I cannot rely on any partner or roommate or flatmate to help me out. Instead, she might just pretend everything is fine. I just need to work out my finances. A second example is that a man who lost his wife may focus all his energy on funeral arrangements, logistics, calling the priest, inviting the neighbors, instead of actually acknowledging his grief, instead of actually working around the fact that he is going to be alone and that he must grieve for his wife who was his long term partner. So, there are many ways in which individuals use intellectualization as a defense mechanism. And we need, as social workers, to understand this, to be able to address it, and not only look at the superficial layer of what an individual is doing, but also work around the underlying causes, probe a little. The analysis in the case study will enable us to probe a little. We need sometimes to use our own discretion, intuition, understanding, ask multiple questions if we are not sure about the individual and his issues. Now we come to unit 4, the last unit of this block, called normality and abnormality. Again, before proceeding, I want to ask each of you that what is normal in our society? You have heard the term normal and abnormal? Normal. What is normal? Sometimes we differ in what we talk as normal and what we talk as abnormal. I will definitely discuss with you abnormal psychology as well. We have been discussing normality, normal behavior, normal process of growing up. Yes, Dennis, would you like to contribute? As field workers, you said that last year you had gone for field work, all of you. Did you share your experience? Yes, Billy Rani, switch on your video. I will be very happy that you are at least initiating the discussion now.
Yeah, normal to my understanding is something acceptable by the society or the community.
Sorry, your voice is not clear.
Okay, to my understanding, normal, when we say normal,
Yes,
is
yes,
something that
yes.
a community or a society accepts, acceptable act or deeds.
Right, right. So what is abnormal psychology? Abnormal psychology is a branch of psychology which deals with psychopathology and abnormal behavior, or the patterns of emotion, thought, and behavior. Did somebody else raise their hand? No. So, abnormal psychology is a branch of psychology that deals with psychopathology and abnormal behavior, or the patterns of emotion, thought, and behavior that can be signs of a mental health condition. You remember yesterday we have discussed mental health, or that also you don't remember? We had started talking about mental health issues yesterday. Kiliropa, is she there or gone? There are 22 people. Ahmad Buba, have you joined now? Can you switch on your video? You and Chipiliro, some of you had been present in class yesterday. Am I right? When we were discussing mental health issues. Mahmood, have you joined now? Mariam, you have also joined. Chipiliro has left the meeting. But yesterday there were a lot of thought on mental health issues. So I am surprised that today you are uh, not being able to contribute. Aliyu Sabu, were you there yesterday? Chipiliro, you want to say something? We were discussing mental health condition yesterday, and we are now saying that abnormal psychology covers a broad range of disorders from depression to obsessive compulsive disorder to personality disorders. Now, counselors, psychologists, and psychotherapists often work directly in the field and deal with distinguishing between what is normal, what is abnormal. Psychologists and social workers focus on the level of distress that behaviors, thoughts, or emotions might cause. So, what is it about our behaviors or our emotions which is going to be a cause for concern for you as a social worker? Yes, Mahmood, you have raised your hand. We were discussing mental health yesterday. Today we are discussing psychology and abnormal psychology. And I'm discussing with you that as counselors and as social workers, as psychologists and psychotherapists, we will need to be working in the field in a clinical context where there are patients, where there are clients, where we may be part of a team, where we may need to distinguish between what is normal and abnormal. And as I was mentioning, there is a lot of subjectivity also involved in deciding what is normal and abnormal in the 21st century. If a behavior is creating problems in a person's life or is disruptive to other people, then this would be abnormal behavior. If any of my behavior in society is creating some disruption, I may require mental health intervention, which we were discussing yesterday as well. Now we are discussing the characteristics of abnormal behavior. Abnormal behavior does not always occur in a pattern. Like we were discussing yesterday about mental health, infrequently, not frequently. It occurs infrequently. Just statistically, we cannot say it will occur at 10 a.m. every Tuesday or at 5 p.m. every Monday after or 5 days of the week. No. Statistical infrequency alone is not a sufficient definition of abnormal behavior. Some healthy behavior, desirable behavior, and beneficial behavior also occurs erratically. So, how do we differentiate between healthy behavior and abnormal behavior? We need to understand that other uncommon behaviors or characteristics have no bearing on how a person behaves or functions. Just because something is unusual or uncommon does not mean that it should be defined as abnormal. Abnormal behavior's second characteristic is that it creates distress. They may disturb the individual or they may be upsetting and disrupting to others. So let us not assume that only they disturb others, they are disturbing to the individual themselves. Himself or herself also can be disturbed because of his or her own abnormal behavior. This is the second major thing which we as social workers need to understand. What is the third major characteristic in abnormal behaviors? That it affects a person's ability to function. So, people who are displaying these behaviors may struggle to function normally in their daily life. It can affect their relationships at school, it can affect their relationships at it can home life, it can affect their relationships in society, it can affect their relationships in their neighborhood. It can reflect their affect their relationships in their community. So there are many aspects which can be impacted by abnormal behavior or mental health issue which an individual may be facing. The last but not the least characteristic in abnormal behavior is that it is socially disruptive. It may violate the social norms in society and make it difficult for people to function in social settings and maintain healthy social relationships. So, what is it that we are discussing now? Mental health, abnormal behavior, and we are now coming to the biological influences which can impact our behavior in society, and society can term it abnormal. The medical or the biological perspective holds the belief that most abnormal behavior or all abnormal behavior can be attributed to genetic influences or environmental influences on the physical functioning of the body. What does a genetic predisposition mean? Susceptibility or predisposition genetically is an increased chance of a human being developing a disease or a pattern of behavior which is based on the genes we inherited from our parents or grandparents. It is possible that genetically abnormality might have been transferred from one grandparent or parent to a child. It is in the genes. Genes influence our personality traits, our IQ, our likelihood of getting cancer or any other lifestyle disease, and even our chances of becoming alcoholic. These are all the biological perspective to abnormality or abnormal behavior. Now, what are the other aspects we need to understand when we talk of abnormal behavior? Psychologically, why do psychologists say and what do sociologists say? So, predominantly, psychological influences are those that reflect learning, which we discussed yesterday, life experiences, or exposure to certain situations. It is these influences, these psychological influences, these psychological aspects, which include difficulty in coping with stress. It can cause illogical fears in some people, exaggerated fears. It can also make one person more susceptible to high emotions and a host of other dysfunctional thoughts or feelings, which can lead to meet the criteria for what we call psychological disorder. So far we were discussing biological aspects. Now we have come to psychological aspects of abnormal disorders, which can lead to mental health issues. The third aspect which we are covering here is the sociological or the socio-cultural aspect. The socio-cultural aspect refers to the various circles of influence on an individual, ranging from close friends and family to institutions and policies of the country. So, whether we talk of the discrimination in any form, discrimination which is based on age, it could be based on criminal record, it could be based on disability. Sometimes we discriminate due to family status, sometimes we discriminate due to gender identities, sometimes we discriminate due to marital status, sometimes we discriminate due to nationality or race or religion or social class. All these can influence the development of a psychological disorder in any human being. So we need to understand the interrelationships between discrimination, disability, and psychological disorder, discrimination, gender identity, and abnormal behavior, discrimination, gender expression, or ethnicity, and developing a psychological disorder. All these social cultural factors need to be factored in by a social worker when they are addressing the client's needs of abnormal behavior. So, other socio-cultural factors, as is displayed in this slide, include sometimes we discriminate because of the rural belt, that such person is staying in the rural area or the urban area. Sometimes because of minority status, we discriminate. So unknowingly discrimination can lead to abnormal behavior is what this slide is trying to highlight. We cannot generalize about cultural practices and beliefs. We need to understand individualization of each client, even though they may be in a given context. We must be careful not to stereotype individuals of any cultural group if we really want to address our clients' health issues. You are seeing here what is called the biopsychosocial model. Can you see this slide? There are four boxes. What I discussed is displayed in this diagram. What does it say about biological influences? In the purple box, genetic makeup of the individual, brain structure, and neurotransmitters. What does it say about the psychological influences? What is the body's response to stress? Is there any pattern of negative thinking in the individual? Both biological influences and psychological influences impact psychological disorders in human beings. The third major component which impacts mental health and could lead to abnormal behavior, could lead to psychological disorders, is socio-cultural influences, which I just discussed with you, but which is depicted in the diagram through 6 parameters. Cultural expectations, what is the definition of normality in the society, what is the definition of order and disorder, is any stigma or prejudice attached in the growing up years which has impacted the psychology of the individual leading to psychological disorders, has the patient or client been part of any abuse, addiction, homelessness, or are there any such factors which has impacted his psyche? So this psychosocial model is very important for each of you to understand if we are to understand psychological disorders and abnormal behavior. I am proceeding with what is called a psychological assessment. Unless you have any questions at this juncture, these are the technical aspects which I need to cover. Does anyone have any questions at this juncture, half an hour into the class? We are willing to discuss. Have you been able to follow? I started with defense mechanisms, which we had covered yesterday, and I completed defense mechanisms, and I moved on to normal and abnormal behaviors leading to psychological disorders and its characteristics. Anybody has any questions here? No? Nobody's listening? Please switch
It's
on
okay,
your
madam.
video.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Wonderful. So we come to the assessment of psychological disorders by the psychologists and social workers, therapists and counselors. A psychological assessment can include many components, which are norm referenced psychological tests, which is specific to psychologists. We will not go into details because that is the specialization for psychologists. But I would request you to read about it in the module because these components have been detailed in that module which is shared with you online, which you have downloaded. So it includes informal tests and surveys, it includes interview information, school records, medical evaluation if any has been done, and observational data. So a psychologist determines what information to use from all this based on the specific questions he or she has to ask the individual whose psychological assessment he or she has to undertake. So psychological testing and evaluation consists of a series of tests that help determine the cause of mental health symptom and disorders. It is not one test, it is a series of tests which the psychologist undertakes, and the conclusions that are derived from those psychological testing and evaluation helps him or her to determine what is the cause of the mental health symptoms which the patient or the client is displaying, what is the cause of the mental health disorders which he is projecting, and in order to determine the correct diagnosis and follow up with appropriate course of treatment, It is important for him or her to arrive at the correct cause so that the diagnosis and treatment is following the correct pattern. If he does not arrive at the correct cause through scientific tests, he cannot follow and analyze in such a way that will help him to diagnose the problem correctly. If his diagnosis is not correct, the course of treatment can go wrong. So it is important for each of you to understand that the symptoms, yes, the symptoms of a problem. Anybody wants to say anything? The symptoms of a problem may be apparent. You and me, as a child, may display similar problems in academics in school or social problems. Or as an adult, we may struggle with maintaining personal relationships or professional relationships. But the cause of the problem in each of us could be different. So, psychological testing is very important. Aptitude tests, personality tests, screenings for any cognitive impairment. There could be some problems physiologically in my brain also. All these together cumulatively are common types of evaluation undertaken by psychologists. Since we are focusing on psychology and its importance in social work practice in this module, in this unit, in this block, I have also written down the classification system which you can read in detail, which is followed by psychologists, the manual of mental disorders, which is followed by psychologists, the classification of disease, which is followed by World Health Organization in determining mental health issues. Way back in 1980, the American Psychiatric Association published the third edition of what is called Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Short form is DSM-3. It was the first attempt to approach diagnosis of mental illness through standardized definitions and criteria. The latest edition of Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5, has been published in 2022, that is last year. It provides a classification system which attempts to separate mental illness into diagnostic categories. Diagnostic categories means diagnosis of the mental health issues. Diagnostic categories are based on symptoms and also on the course of the illness. Description of symptoms includes what? Description of symptoms includes what people say about their symptoms, about their health issues, and what they do as a reflection of how they think and feel. A combination of these is important for the psychologist to understand. What is the International Classification of Disease? In short, ICD 11th revision, so it is ICD 11. It was first published by the World Health Organization in 2019. It is used by diagnostic categories similar to those in DSM-5. This similarity indicates that diagnosis of specific mental illness are becoming more standard and consistent throughout the world. So there is a standardization of the understanding of mental health disease, of classification of disease, and of mental disorders through these processes. And that's why classification system is background of this classification system is important for us to understand. Now, the global assessment of function scale is another term which psychologists use very often and which you as social worker may not be familiar with. Therefore, it's important to introduce this here in our BSW class. The global assessment of function scale is a 100-point score, measures the overall level of psychological functioning, social functioning, and occupational functioning on a continuum. 100, from 0 to 100, that is the scale. So 0 indicates that you are a veteran or individual having severe difficulty with daily activities and functions. And 100 means minimal problem in daily activities and functioning of the body. So, this physiological, psychological, social functioning hypothetical continuum is called Global Assessment of Function Scale. Now we come to what are anxiety disorders, which we also mentioned yesterday in the context of mental health issues. Anxiety disorders are a group of mental illnesses which cause constant and overwhelming anxiety, more than necessary, more than we can handle. Excessive anxiety can make you avoid work, make you feel ill, make you feel under the weather, make you feel that you cannot get out of the house, make you feel that you don't want to go to school as a child, make you feel that you don't want to attend family get togethers or any social situations which might trigger or worsen your symptoms. So it's important to understand anxiety disorders if we need to become effective social workers. Now, the last 6, 7 slides of this presentation are Unit 5 Basic Concepts of Social Psychology. Before I come to the last 6 slides of this presentation, does anyone have any thoughts on mental health, on mental disorders, on abnormal psychology, on your experiences in the field, if you have been confronted with or you have been part of any process where you have seen mental health issues or dealt with mental health disorders? Would anyone like to share? Mahmood, you wanted to say something sometime back. Are you still there? No response, so I think I should proceed. Basic concepts of social psychology, the last part of this presentation. Social psychology, what is it? Social psychology is the scientific study of how people's thoughts, feelings, beliefs, intentions, and goals are constructed within a social context. So, within a social context, how we think, how we feel, what we believe in, what our intentions are, how our goals are constructed in actually or imagined interactions with others, that constitutes social psychology. It is a big field of study and needs to be understood in detail. Psychology, as we have been saying in the last 2 classes, simply is the study of the behavior and mind of the individual. And there are different types of psychology, which we mentioned yesterday, such as cognitive psychology, social psychology, developmental psychology. Now, what are the 4 major perspectives of social psychology, which is our reason for this Unit 5? The 4 major perspectives of social psychology are socio-cultural, evolutionary, social learning, and social cognitive. This is little technical, and that's why I'm encouraging you again to be attentive and to read the module so that you don't lose the importance of social psychology. When we spoke of psychology in itself, we had said that the scope of psychology can be divided into pure psychology and applied psychology. So now we come to pure psychology. Pure psychology studies general psychology, which we studied earlier in this module, abnormal psychology, which we studied in the past 1 hour, social psychology, geopsychology, physical psychology, and experimental psychology. We are currently focusing on social psychology. But we need to understand that psychology in itself has 4 major goals. What are those 4 goals? Why do we need to understand the psychology of a person? To describe, to explain, to predict, and to change or control the behavior of the individual depending on his or her situation, circumstance. These 4 goals, describing, explaining, predicting, and attempting to change or control human behavior, these 4 goals are the foundation of most of the theories of psychology, are the foundation of most of the studies which are undertaken on psychology. And these theories and studies attempt to understand the cognitive, the thinking, the emotional, and the behavioral process that people face in their daily lives. How do we think? How do we express our emotions? How do we behave? These things are very important for psychologists and social workers to understand. Having said that, having introduced you to social psychology, it is important to narrate the scope and the importance of social psychology. Please note that social psychology studies human behavior in groups and how human behavior is influenced by others. So, how is one person's behavior influenced by others in the group? That is important to understand. It attempts to understand the social, psychological causes and motives of human behavior in groups. Why do we behave a particular way when we are in a group? And why do we behave differently if we are by ourselves? So it's very important to understand that social psychology includes social perception, how we perceive others, how others perceive us as well, social interaction, how we interact with others and how others interact with us as well, and many kinds of social influence which we have on each other. Do we trust each other? What are the power equations with each other? Do we have any persuasive abilities with each other in a group? All these become important components of social psychology. We also need to understand that social psychology tries to understand the influence that individual perceptions and behavior, our individual perception, our way of looking at the world, our behaviors toward others, what impact does it have on the behavior of others in the group, in a team, in a class, in a classroom, whether we are children or we are grown up or we are adults or we are doing BSW or MSW. We are working in groups. Whether we are in field work, we are working in teams. We are working with other people who are part of the organization. How does that influence each other? All of this constitutes an integral part of social psychology. So, what do social psychologists focus on? Social psychologists focus on societal concerns, concerns of the society. What are those concerns? Those concerns which have an influence on well-being of the individual and the health of the society as a whole. So there are two ends of the spectrum, two ends of the pendulum: individual well-being and societal well-being. Well-being of the individual and well-being and health of the society as a whole. Issues such as substance abuse or crime or prejudice or discrimination, which we mentioned a little while ago, or domestic abuse or public health, as was in COVID time, especially aggressive behavior among street children, among others. All these are causes for concern for social psychologists. So, the psychological and the physiological interplay of individuals becomes an important part of the study and the role with which social psychologists deal with human beings in society, address concerns of the society and the individual. They cannot neglect either the individual or the society. Why are we saying that? Because if we discuss psychological and physiological aspects of the individual, we need to appreciate that personality, which we have been discussing for past 2 days, is a psychological construct. But research also suggests that it is influenced by biological processes, how our body functions, by biological needs at every stage of growing up. So, psychology helps people in large part because it can explain in detail, it can reflect, it can project why people act the way they do, why some days are good and some days are not so good for some individuals. Why some days we are quiet, some days we are more interactive. Why some days we are willing to engage with our classmates and encourage each other, some days we are disinterested. All this becomes part of social psychology. And this behavior, this perception, these habits are studied by social psychologists. So, psychology helps people in large part because it can explain why people act the way they do. With this kind of professional insight, with this kind of professional understanding, a psychologist can help people improve their decision making capability. They can help people in managing their stress. They can help people in managing their behavior because they base their understanding on the past behavior of the individual, the history of the individual, in order to better predict what future behavior can be. We also need to appreciate that the nature and the scope of the activities means that there are broad categories of what outputs will come about based on the inputs which the social psychologist gets by interviewing his clients. So, what then are the domains of social psychology? Very important to understand. The domains, as I mentioned, are biological, means it includes neuroscience, sensation, consciousness. It is cognitive, means it's our intelligence, our memory, our perception, the way we study, the way we think, the what we believe in. It is also developmental because the tasks developmental as we were growing up was our learning proportional to our developmental tasks. What was our conditioning like in growing up stage? What is lifespan development? What was the language we used? Did we work on the language? What skills did we develop? This is repeated. So these three domains are very important for us to understand if we are going to understand the social psychologist's arena of work. Now, I am going to take a pause here. I will come to this aspect of the presentation tomorrow and I will link it to counseling. But for now, I want to take a break from this presentation and move to the next presentation. But I also want to take feedback from you for so far what I have completed with you before I do these 6 slides. These are very important, but I want to link it to leadership and role of a leader subsequently, not immediately. I don't want to link it to the social psychology part today. I want to bring it up tomorrow when I am hoping that more participation will be there from you. Today, I will do the next unit in about 5 minutes. First, I will take feedback from you. So, what do you have to say in your understanding so far of 1.5 hour or 1 hour for 10 minutes of my class? Bua Bobson, I didn't hear from you from 2 days. Any feedback, understanding of any psychological, abnormal psychological, your experiences from the field? Day before, we had excellent sharing of experiences from the field. I was expecting that today, but somehow today you are a little slow in responding. But I think it's important to take feedback before I move on to the next part. So, do you have any experiences? Do you remember any of your fieldwork journey of last year? Michael Simba, Chaima, Davies, Mahmood, yesterday you were very happy to discuss.
Yeah,
Tell me.
for me, I just want to say everything is okay,
Okay.
especially your pace, the way you are lecturing this. To me, I don't see any problem, and I'm well understood and understand since we have been started this class. You are not too fast, not too slow. You are at a normal pace.
Okay.
So I can't say anything. For me, I just say thank you because you have taken us from stage to stage, and I hope everybody is able to understand whatever you are teaching here. Thank you
Yeah,
so
so
much,
one
madam.
by one, yeah, one by one, if we can get feedback or any sharing of experiences, then I will proceed with that next unit, and I will link this leadership to that unit subsequently. I want to see the leadership qualities in you people before taking that unit. So, Bua Bobson, Davies, today this one, Mahmood is not contributing to our conversation. Yesterday also he gave some good example. Nafisat, I didn't hear at all from day one. Nafisat, can you switch on your video? Tahir, Sunny, any response? Please think about it before I just switch to my uh, presentation. I'm giving you 2 minutes. You give me also 2 minutes just to switch on that presentation. But before switching it on, I want to again take you to this module, this book which you have downloaded, you said, because I'm wondering, I just want you to get some idea. Where did it go? Not shared. This one. You remember first day we have downloaded this book, and it is the unit we are discovering. It is human growth, behavior and counseling. And I want to show you the first screenshot, this block, which we covered from day one, just to recap what we are doing, because I'm hoping you are not lost. So block 1, we completed on first day, process of growing up. Block 2, we went on to human growth and development. Now we are 3/4 completed block 3, basics of psychology for social workers. And I will move to block 4, but I will link it with the last part of block 3. So block flow is basics of counseling. But I want you to also see one part. Went down. I wanted you to see the screen of the 4 blocks, because you need to know that we have almost completed, and tomorrow is the last day. We have 1 hour more, 45 minutes more today. Yeah, this one. Just for revision, I'm showing this to you. Block 1, process of growing up, we completed these 5 units. Block 2, human growth and development, I completed. And you were asked to read personality development, determinants of personality, different stages of human development, theories of personality, and psychosexual development, Freudian concept. For the past yesterday and today, we were covering block 3, that is basics of psychology for social workers. And we did 5 units in 2 days. Relevance of psychology in social work practice, basic psychological concepts in human behavior, defense mechanisms, which you people were to give me feedback on, but participation was poor. I'm hoping that tomorrow you will read and come, because I am giving 10 minutes tomorrow for feedback on defense mechanisms. Today, I have covered normality and abnormality and basic concepts of social psychology, mostly. I want to now introduce you to basics of counseling, which is introduction to counseling, processes involved in counseling, supportive and behavioral techniques in counseling, cognitive and psychoanalytical techniques in counseling, and practical issues involved in counseling. So I will introduce you to unit 1 and try and cover part of unit 2, because if I do all 5 units tomorrow, it will become too much for you. So I don't want to do that. I want to start some part of this unit, so that it is not too much for you to understand only in one day. I want to do at least half an hour today before I take your questions and feedback. So you can see block 4 is called basics of counseling. Can you see that slide? This presentation, can you see? Yeah?
Yes, we can see.
You can see. Okay. Chipileru, you were going to say something somewhere, but you didn't contribute. I thought that you will switch on your video and share at least feedback up to now, today's session, whether you have been attentive or not. And then I want to proceed with this unit.
Okay, can I come in now?
Of course, definitely.
Okay. We learned about abnormality in the
Hmm.
it's a abnormality. So whereby normality is acting normal in the community, where abnormality is really the opposite of normality, of which I think between health and the abnormality.
Your voice
Monadi,
is breaking. You want to switch off your video and just talk? Your voice is breaking little bit. Maybe it is
how about
impacting. It may help.
how
Huh.
about
Whatever is comfortable for you.
am I clear now?
Now clear. Yes, much clear. Definitely.
Okay. I link up the importance of sharing mental health to help a social worker to act normality in the community, in the presence of the people who do act abnormality. Thank you.
Okay, good. Anybody else wants to give feedback so far what we have been discussing and what was important for you? Sometimes one or two things are like, okay, this I think is more important than the other things. Anybody has any feedback to give? Okay. So I will just proceed with the objectives of this unit. There are 5 major objectives. It covers the nature of counseling. It talks of the difference between counseling and psychotherapy. It speaks of the disorders for which counseling is not always the best therapy. There's spelling mistake here. Then it talks of the general characteristics of a good counselor, which we are trying to be. And it also talks of the characteristics of a good client, which the client might be or not be. So, this is very important for us to understand. Does anyone want to say anything here? Amondi, you have joined, but you have not shared your thoughts. You want to switch on your video and say something at in this juncture? Have you been following the class? Lois also joined just now. Alia Sabu. Anybody who wants to share? Let me know now. Otherwise, I am proceeding. Right. So I was just saying that the 5 objectives of this last module is talking about the nature of counseling, the difference between counseling and psychotherapy, the disorders for which counseling is not the best therapy, the general characteristics of a good counselor, and the characteristics of a good client. Yes. So these objectives have been laid. There are 5 units in this module, which I mentioned to you just now. Introduction to Counseling, Unit 1. Processes involved in counseling, Unit 2. Supportive and behavioral techniques in counseling, Unit 3. Cognitive and psychoanalytical techniques in counseling, Unit 4. And practical issues involved in counseling, Unit 5. So we begin with Unit 1. What is counseling, which we have been talking about since yesterday? Counseling is the provision of professional assistance and guidance in resolving personal or psychological problems. What are the role and responsibilities of a counselor? We will come to, but we need to understand that counseling has a very specific role, and the process occurs when we call it counseling. When do we call it counseling? When a client and a counselor set aside a designated time, a specific time, to discuss, explore the difficulties which the client may be facing due to stressful or emotional conditions confronted by the client. He asks for an appointment is given, a time is set aside, and a safe space is given for both to sit, not disturbed by anybody. Confidentiality is maintained. And this act of helping the client to see things more clearly from a different point of view is the role played by the counselor. It is in the counseling space that the counselor or the social worker can enable the client to focus on his or her feelings, to focus on his or her experiences or behavior with the goal of facilitating positive change. So, there is a goal with which the counseling session is planned and devised and used. The counseling space is also a relationship of trust. It is based on the premise that there's an element of trust between the counselor and the client. We cannot gossip and discuss the issues of the client with our friends, family, neighbors, classmates. Confidentiality is paramount to successful counseling. We need to believe in it and we need to use it if we need the client's trust. Then we need to believe in it and we need to use it as a value that we believe in. Professional counselors will usually explain their policy on confidentiality. They may, however, be required to disclose certain information if they believe that there is a risk to the life of the client. Sometimes, when we are working in teams, also, we may need to discuss the case of the client with our co workers as a professional co worker, and that is called shared confidentiality. You need to use this term shared confidentiality. It's an important term. So, in that case, we need to tell the client that we may need to discuss your matter with one of our professionals. And an understanding has to be there between the client and the counselor that my matter will not be discussed like a gossip or Facebook or put on Twitter. No, it's confidential, right? So, what then are the important goals of counseling? There are five. Hello? Yes, somebody wants to say something, Amondi? Please go ahead. Switch on your video. I can't switch on your video and share your thoughts before I move to important goals of counseling. Do you want to share your thoughts? Yes? I can't hear you. You want to write in the chat? Okay, I think I'm not getting any response. The important goals of counseling are as follows. One, to reduce the emotional distress of a client. Two, to reduce the dysfunctional behaviors of a client. Three, to promote better adaptation of the client to his or her environment. Four, to assist the client in making important personal decisions. And five, to enhance the self-determination of the client. So counseling, generally a series of counseling sessions are held. It is not just one counseling session which will enable us to do this. And what are we attempting to do? I am repeating, to enable the client to help reduce the emotional distress. It say to make it vanish, to make it disappear. It says to help reduce, minimize the emotional distress of a client, to reduce the dysfunctional behaviors of a client, to promote, encourage better adaptation of a client to his or her environment. What else does it help to do? What else are the other goals that it attempts to address? Counseling enables assisting the client in making important personal decisions. How will it help the client in making important personal decisions? Can you tell me? How can we help the client in making important personal decisions? If the client can address his or her anxieties, if the client can reduce his or her fears, if the client can discuss his or her insecurities, if the client's behavior can be adapted, if the client can come to terms that the counselor's help is going to benefit him or her, then as a consequence, we can enable them to address their personal decisions. And subsequently, we can enable them to enhance self-determination. What is self-determination? Does anyone know what is self? Have you studied the principle of self-determination any time in your theory class?
Yes, yes.
What does it say? Principle of self-determination.
Uh,
And we all use the principle of self-determination. Yes.
Self-determination is like respecting the view of the client or the way
Very good.
looks. Don't judge the client. Respect his or her views, what he's saying. That will help the social worker to know how to help. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Anybody else has any thought on principle of self-determination? What are the other principles? Does anyone remember? What are the principles which a social worker needs to recall?
Yeah, there is.
Principles of social work.
Yeah, there is also the principle of confidentiality. The social worker.
Excellent.
Yeah, as a social worker, I need to keep the secret of the client, despite the or the whatever the client has said. But the confidentiality is very important because to feel well helped. He or she knows that his or her secret is kept in your
Safe.
hands.
Correct. Any other principle anybody remembers? So you have to do this homework for tomorrow.
Can I say something?
Of course, I'm waiting.
Okay. We also have the principle of non-judgmental attitude.
Sorry, principle of
Non-judgmental attitude.
excellent, non-judgmental attitude. What does non-judgmental mean?
Okay, as a social worker, you should not always judge the client. Whenever a client has come up with their problems, you are not supposed to judge them in whatever
Right.
decision whatever the decision they have made, but rather help them make important decisions.
Correct. Very nice. Yes, Chaima, what are the principles? I think total 7 principles. 3 you have told me. Yes, Chaima? You have raised your hand or who has raised the hand?
Yeah, self-determination.
Andiro.
Yeah, self-determination is like person's ability to make choices and manage their own lives.
Hmm.
That's it.
Very good. That's it? Okay. So 4 more principles you will read and come tomorrow. Which are the other principles? Possible? Yes, Aliu, Sabu. Please go ahead, switch on your video if you can.
Non-judgmental attitude.
Mm. Means what?
Non-judgmental attitude. You can
Yeah, what does it mean? I'm asking.
not make a decision without knowing the patient's views.
Okay.
You, a social worker, you cannot make a final decision on your own
Correct.
unless you heard it from the client.
Mm. Okay. Any experience you have in fieldwork which you can share? Because I'm understanding that it is coming from your experiences in fieldwork, which you are sharing such valuable information with me. Anybody has had any experience where you have used the principle of confidentiality or used the principle of non-judgmentality or use the principle of self-determination. Ahmad Buba has written, my computer has no charge and I think it will be shut down. Why every day of class I was not able to complete the class. We don't have to study light in our, we don't have steady light in our community. Okay, fine. So let's see what we can do. Then we can proceed. What is counseling is not. It is not just about giving advice. Sometimes we give advice to each other. Sometimes we give advice to our children. Sometimes we give advice to our neighbors. Sometimes our siblings give advice to us. That is not counseling. Being judgmental is definitely not counseling, which you yourselves have told me just now. Attempting to sort out the problems of the client yourself is not counseling. The client has to be helped to help himself or herself. The client has to solve his or her problems. We don't have to solve the problem for the client. That's very important for us to understand through this module. Expecting or encouraging a client to behave as the counselor would behave if confronted with a similar problem is not counseling. We are not going to be telling the client, if I was in your situation, I would do this. If I was in your situation, I would have divorced my husband. If I was in your situation, I would have put the child in the hostel. If I was in your husband's place, I would have done this. If I was in your wife's place, I would have left the house. No, we have to weigh the pro and cons. We have to enable the client to see the pro and cons. We just have to put all the facts on the table. We just have to bring to light to the client his or her situation. We cannot get emotionally involved with the client. We cannot sit there and cry with the client. We cannot get judgmental and we cannot get emotional. These are very important learning for us as social workers and clients. Looking at a client's problem from your own perspective based on your own value system is very different. The value system and the perspective of the client may be very different. That is why the role of self determination, the principle of self determination is very important. And that is why I'm asking you to read about the principles before coming back to class tomorrow, so that we understand that counseling is built on the principles, and counselors and social workers use the principles very carefully in undertaking counseling and in differentiating between counseling and guidance, in differentiating between counseling and being judgmental, in using the principle of self determination and confidentiality, in encouraging the client to take responsibility for his or her decisions, in encouraging the client to take charge of his or her emotions, in enabling the client to look at issues from his or her perspective. So, this brings us to differentiating between counseling and psychotherapy. Psychotherapy and counseling. There are two terms. Counseling is also known as talk therapy, consisting of conversation or a single conversation or a series of conversations taking place between a psychologist and a social worker, a psychologist or a social worker and a client. The difference between counseling and psychotherapy is that counseling is a short term process, while psychotherapy is a long term process. Yes, Kandiro, I'm willing to take your response now before proceeding in this module. Chima.
Yeah, mine is just a question.
Hmm.
If someone helps someone to help himself, didn't he attempt to sort out the problem?
Someone helps someone to help himself. Yeah. Take the example. You are helping your classmate. Someone helps someone to help himself. Are we helping the classmate, a neighbor, a parent, a sibling? That is helping, assisting, enabling, encouraging, playing the role of a sibling or playing the role of a parent. Is that what you're asking? But counseling is more technical. based on certain principles, based on a training. Training to be a counselor requires several characteristics which we will come to now. What do others think? Someone helping someone to help himself. Is that counseling? Is that helping? What is it? Is that advice giving? Is that being a good neighbor and a good friend? The characteristics of a counselor we will come to. But I want to hear the response. Because if we don't understand our understanding today, then we can't proceed to understanding the technicalities of being a counselor. Who wants to contribute here? Chakana, Chipiliro, Juan. Anybody has any thoughts on helping? Being a helper, being a friend, being a counselor? We need to understand the difference. Counseling is a short-term process, whereas psychotherapy is a long-term process. Just look at the differences between a counselor and a psychotherapist and try and jot down points before we come to tomorrow discussing the difference between a friend, a neighbor, a parent helping the child, a counselor, and a psychotherapist. So counseling is short-term solution for present issues. Psychotherapist plays the role of providing long-term solution for recurring problems. Counselor is focused on action and behavior of the individual. Psychotherapist focuses on the feeling and the experience of the individual. Counseling is a secondary process. Psychotherapy is primary focused. Counselor offers guidance and support. Psychotherapist provides talk therapy and other therapeutic strategies which we are not discussing but which we need to read up. So these are the four major differences highlighted between being a counselor and being a psychotherapist. Now, what are the characteristics of a good counselor? A good counselor has good communication skills, has patience, has confidence in his ability to be a counselor, is non judgmental, is observant, has listening skills, follows trust, is respectful of the client and his or her situation, accepts the client for his or her situation and behavior, is self aware, is appreciative of diversity, and is empathetic. Empathy, have you heard the term empathy? What is empathy? And which brings me to the next question which Chaima wants to ask. If I am going to start crying while the client is also crying about his or her problem, saying that, yes, I understand your issue. My sister also faced domestic abuse in childhood, or my mother also faced domestic abuse in childhood. Is that a good response to a client? Question one. Empathy, sympathy, crying along with the client, saying, I understand your pain. I also start crying along with you. What are the indications of a counselor who will sit and cry along with the client? Have you seen a counselor, any of you? Have you been in any situation where you have seen or known the working of a counselor? Anybody can tell me from their field, from their experience, from their knowledge of first year of fieldwork, from their knowledge of first year of classroom study? Yes or no?
Hello?
Has anybody chipilero? Yeah.
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 When a counselor discussion,
Your voice is breaking, breaking. Your voice is breaking. You have to use the mic, I think, better. Some disturbance is coming in
Ah,
your mic.
over here.
Hmm.
Hello.
Yes, much better now. Much better. I think you have to hold the mic or something. Nobody is saying anything.
When he, yeah, when he, in counseling, a counselor and a client are discussing. When the client is the client, a counselor has to pretend, not to pretend, but to be strong.
Hmm.
Listen attentively. A counselor can be in a client's shoes, but not telling him or her what he or she has been passing through the same scenario, but to guide the client how best he can or she can be supported.
Very good. Have any of you been a counselor? Been do you have school counselors in your school? Yes, Omar Aminu. Please respond. Omar Amimo, please
Yes,
respond.
ma. Yes,
Can I
ma.
see you? Video? Video you can switch on?
Okay, I'll switch on the video now.
Wonderful. Because I want to understand, have you ever seen a counselor? I can tell you everything about counseling, but what have you known and understood so far? That is important for
Yes,
me to
I've met
understand.
a counselor before.
Right? What kind of
Yes,
counselor can you share, or what kind of experience can you share with the others in the class?
though the counselor I met was on the school. We went there together with my friend so that he can address us of some issues.
Mm-hmm.
So, though the counselor is a trained profession who provide guidance and support in assisting to an individuals,
Right.
they use their what expertise and therapy and techniques to help clients
Mm.
to
Excellent.
address issues and improve their overall being. Can you hear me,
Addressing the
ma?
issue. Mm.
Yes, they help clients to address their issue and improve their overall well-being.
Right.
Yes, I think that's all about what I know about a counselor.
That's good. Good knowledge. Anybody
All right,
else
thank you,
remembers
ma.
anything? Yes, very good. Anybody else remembers anything? Kanviro, Chaima?
Yeah, I'm still confused on a good counselor. They
By
said that
tomorrow.
a good, hello,
Yeah, by tomorrow the confusion will be sorted. This is the beginning of the confusion because
a
we have.
good counselor.
Hmm.
Hello, I know it's
Yes,
not too much. Yeah, it's just a little bit. A
but it's
good
good.
counselor should not be judgmental but observant. They talk like that.
Right.
Two, they said a good counselor should not attempt to solve the problem.
Hmm.
Now the question is, if a counselor
Hmm.
help someone to help himself, didn't
Hmm.
he attempt to sort out the problem?
Hmm. Okay. Counselor helps someone to help himself. We don't know that in one meeting the problem will be solved, or in four meetings, or in 10 meetings. That's the first thing. It depends on the problem. What is the problem? What the client has said about the problem, how much homework the counselor has to do about the problem, how much the client is willing to reveal about the problem, what kind of psychological background or framework the client has come with to the counselor, how efficient and experienced is the counselor in addressing that particular issue. Counselors typically have formal education and training. Excellent. In psychology, counseling, social work, and related fields. That's true. They may hold various degrees. such as masters in counseling, masters in social work, or doctor of psychology. They may also be having diploma in psychology, depending on their specialization and depending on the number of cases they have dealt with in the past. I was a school social worker and counselor for more than 11 years in a public school in Delhi. Now, in the first year of my being a counselor, I was not as efficient as I was in the 10th year of my being a counselor. So it depends on the experience I gained while on the job, the kind of cases which came to me as clients like student, teacher, management, community social workers, conflicts, peer groups, conflict between teacher and students, students with poor academic performance and behavioral issues, students with family problems. They are not going to directly tell me everything just because I'm a counselor. They might hesitate to tell me how I interview them, what kind of open ended questions I ask them, how do I follow, how do I build trust with them, how does the confidentiality built up. It doesn't happen on day one seeing my face. They will not say, oh, I trust this woman, she will not be revealing anything. I can tell her everything. 20 of you are not talking on this platform on day 5. How long does it take to build trust? It takes a long time to build trust between a counselor and a client. The counselor has to have certain characteristics, but the counselor also has to know that he has to have certain abilities, certain traits, certain qualities in functioning as a counselor. His experience is going to be useful in functioning as a counselor. In this slide also you can see that if there are issues of abnormal behavior or abnormal talk or presence of delusions or presence of hallucinations in the client or any obsessions or compulsions or severe mood swings or loss of judgment in the client, these are very serious issues which the counselor cannot deal with, but the psychotherapist has to deal with. At what stage will the counselor refer the case to the psychotherapist? At what referral? What is the importance of referral for a counselor? To be able to tell the client that this is beyond my mandate, despite all the training I have, despite all the degrees I have acquired. I might require to consult a psychotherapist or a senior counselor. I might require to refer your matter to a senior authority. These are the possibilities in a counseling situation. Chaima, have I begun to address your question? Some part of your question have I begun to address?
Yes, madam, you have done it, and I'm well understood there.
So, there are several disorders in any client's. Client will not always come with simple issue that I had a fight with my parent, I walked out of the house. I am taking drugs, my father threw me out of the house. No, there could be complex situations with which the client may approach you depending on where you are working. The clients may be suffering from severe form of depression. The client may be facing some different forms of anxiety. The client may be facing situations where they are unable to adjust with the current situation, and for several years they have not taken treatment. The client may be coming with severe emotional disorders. The client may be coming with a combination of personal problems and drug problems and alcohol problems. The client may be projecting symptoms which the counselor may never have seen before. There could be n number of situations where the counselor will be confronted with clients. It will all not be straight jacketed and simple. It can be taking many sessions for the counselor to even come to the bottom of the problem of the client. So we need to understand these aspects when we talk about counseling and when we talk about the boundaries of counseling, when we talk about the limitations of counseling, when we talk about the possibilities of counseling, when we talk about ourselves as a counselor, there could be many situations which we will be confronted with. And that is why, as I said, tomorrow I want more discussion on what situations we ourselves may have been through where we have not gone for counseling? Do we have the courage to discuss that situations in a classroom setting, which is a safe space for discussion, so that when we become counselors and social workers, deal with maybe coming with similar or dissimilar situations, and do we have the understanding of being a counselor? Coming to the communication skills of a good counselor, are we conscious of our own body language? Are we conscious of the fact that are we good listeners? Are we conscious of the fact that when we are being asked to speak and share, we are hesitant? So, what will we do when our clients are sitting quietly in our classroom, in our cabin? We are also not speaking. The client is also not speaking, but we have to solve the problem. We have to address the problem. We have to get to the understanding of what is the client's issue. How will you come to know if you yourselves are not good communication? What does communication mean? What does listening mean? What does it mean to be polite or courteous or tactful? If the client is giving you mixed messages, you are also giving the client mixed messages. You are saying if the client didn't tell me his problems, how will I solve his problems? Then how will you solve his problems? That is why I'm encouraging you to discuss these issues here in the classroom setting, for which I have kept tomorrow also half an hour, especially because this is the most essential part, process of growing up, understanding of adolescence, understanding of adulthood, theoretical understanding of theories, understanding of the studies, understanding of psychologists' contribution, getting a knowledge of who are the psychologists who contributed is simple. But the technical part is what we have come to now. How will you inquire? How will you summarize the problems of the client? How will you encourage the client to express their thoughts and feelings? If the client is not saying anything but sitting and what will you do? If the client doesn't say anything, so tomorrow we will do. One of you will be the client, one of you will be the counselor. Start getting ready for that tomorrow, the last class. How will you address the problem? Chipilero will be the client, Chaima will be the counselor. Amihu will be the client, Mahmood will be the counselor. I'm going to pair you up. And you need to, I will give you a case situation. How will you handle it? What will you say? How will the client feel comfortable in your presence? How will you communicate with the client? How will you encourage them? How will you encourage them to talk about their problems? The client will not come and tell you directly, my wife beat me up, I was in denial.
Your microphone is on.
And now please solve my problem. No, it will not happen like that. If I was in a position to solve my own problem, why would I come to you? You are the counselor. I would need to come to you. I can solve my own problem. If I just had to rely on advice, I would have taken it from my friend, from my sibling, from my parent, from my neighbor. But no, I have come to a professional counselor. And that's why tomorrow I will get you through unit 2, that what are the processes involved in counseling? What does initial interview mean? What does assessment mean? What is the middle stage? What is the termination stage of counseling? And how do we become effective counselors? How do we look at our own weaknesses as social work professionals, as social workers in the making, if we want to become effective counselors?
The main screen now has the usable
Right?
layout.
Are you beginning to understand what I'm trying to tell you? The tricky part of operationalizing your role as a counselor is what we will come to tomorrow. And please think about it. today and come back with your thoughts and understanding. Try and recall situations where you and I needed counseling. How did we go about it? Did we get the help we needed? What were we feeling at that time? Were we willing to take help? Were we in a position to take help? Could we articulate our thoughts and feelings? Could we share our concerns? How comfortable were we in sitting in a cabin with a counselor or a social worker to share our problems? All these aspects we need to think about before we come back to class tomorrow. Are there any questions before we close? Any concerns which you want to express? Any thoughts which you may have? Please go ahead. We have 5 minutes more for today's class. Yes, Anas.
Okay,
Please
so this
switch
is
on
the
your
raise
video.
the hand.
Hello, ma. Am I
Yes,
audible?
yes, clearly audible.
Do you mean that we are going to discuss between each one of us, each and other of us?
We have to, otherwise, how will we learn? Na? How will we learn? Only if we will play
Come
do
again,
some
ma.
role. We need to do some role play tomorrow online to learn how to do counseling. So I will go through my remaining
Okay, ma.
presentation, but we want to prepare you to be a good counselor. So we will do some role play online. One of us will be client, one of us
Okay,
will
ma.
be counselor. Others will be listening. Then
Okay.
we will discuss that
Okay.
is it the right set of questions we have asked? Could we ask the question differently? Did we get the information we wanted? Could we have asked the question differently?
Okay, ma.
If as a client I was quiet, I could not express myself, was the counselor able to get the information out of me and address my problem? Did it take one session or 5 sessions? Is it a practical solution to the problem? Are there other ways of dealing with the situation? Do we need to refer the case to anyone else? You're getting my point,
Okay, ma.
Anna and others?
Thank you. Yes, ma. Yes, ma.
Is it a good idea or we don't need to do this?
That's a very good idea. We have to so that we can see how our performance it is.
Yeah, but you have to also encourage others to come to class tomorrow because if they are not there, they will not be able to learn. So we need to, uh, you have to decide that who will be the client and who will be the counselor before tomorrow. Anas,
Hello, ma. What makes me ask this question is that because since in my life I've not met anything like a counselor, and
so
it
that is
comes to
why we
me
need to know,
just
na, tomorrow is our day to meet the counselor and to see what we can do.
okay. Thank you. But you said that we are to inform others to join the meeting. But
Yes, of course.
some of our colleagues are not in the class for the past almost 5 or 6 days, and we doesn't
Yeah,
have
but
good contact with them that we
okay.
can talk
So
to them
those
to
who are
tell them.
like Mahmood,
We just have
uh,
their.
see how many people can join, no problem. Okay, please see how many
Okay,
people
ma.
can
Thank
join.
you.
Thank you. So we will meet tomorrow with the fully charged that if we are counselor or client, how are we going to go about it and how we can solve our problem. Okay,
Okay, ma'am.
please try and we will meet tomorrow at 3 p.m. But I want you to read up a little
Thank you,
bit,
ma.
on this counseling part, the last unit, so that you are prepared for the discussion. Because it's our last class, we need to make good use of it, isn't it? We can't
Ma'am,
waste it.
I have some small request to our
Yes, sir. Dr. Panigrahi was saying something, but he has unmute.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Now you are audible. Yes. Now you are audible. Yes.
I request to all the learners, you have a 146 learners taken admission in this course. So I request to all of you, kindly join in more number, so it will be benefited to you. Very few number of students are coming. Repeatedly, you are sending a mail to all of you. So if you know your friends, please tell them. So join more number of students in the class. So then class will interesting. Am I right?
Sir, your voice is breaking.
Sir is
Yeah, you
saying,
are, sir.
Thank you very
You
much.
are.
sir is saying, please ask other students to join in the class so that class will be interesting.
I am telling you,
Michael Sims says he can't code yes.
thank you. Thank you for today's
Thank you,
class.
sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Okay, bye everyone. See you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Okay? But we have to do homework and come. Read about counseling little bit so that we can be the counselor. Sunny, tomorrow you will be the counselor. Okay? So read about the role of a counselor. Okay, bye. Simba, Umar, Lois, Chipelero, Joan, everybody, bye. Yes, Denta.
All right, bye, ma.
Okay, bye. What is that?
Bye. See you tomorrow.
Bye,
See you
ma.
tomorrow.
Denta wants to say something.